everyone. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach and author of the delightful little book, A Life to Die For, which I would love to have you grab a copy of on my author's page in Amazon. I'm also one of the co-authors of the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. Today, I'm delighted to get going on episode number 199 of Life Mastery TV, and our topic today is called Invisible No More. Now, I think you'll agree that everyone likes to be seen and heard and experienced for who they really are. Indeed, I think it's actually necessary for us to step up and be seen if we want to fully express and experience ourselves as the amazing beings we really are. Unfortunately, some people go through life challenges during their formative years that leave them injured or traumatized or even worse. And they end up believing it's not safe for them to be seen. As a result, they choose to stay in the background. You know, the old wallflower thing that, well, I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself here, but that was a phrase that was common when I was a kid in school. And so they avoid the likelihood of standing out so that they don't have to be risking being judged or worse by other people. Meanwhile, the deep desire of their heart is that sooner or later, some loving entity will show up and actually notice them and see them for who they really are. Well, for this week's episode of Life Mastery TV, I've invited a visibility sage to share some of her wisdom and techniques for helping people to openly and freely express their souls in the world that seems intent on getting us to hide our true nature. My guest is the creator of Sage Sensation Retreats and founder of the award-winning marketing agency, The Story Stylist. Her mission is to model and facilitate self-healing, energy shifts, and heart leadership that supports new earth leaders in making their vision and magic more visible. So please welcome the lovely and delightful Gayle Nowak to today's program. I hope I pronounced that name correctly, Gayle.
Yes, you did.
So, yeah, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I was just thinking about that. That's kind of like a Slavic name, isn't it?
It's Polish, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that's my married name.
That's your married name, yeah. Yeah, I've seen variations of that name in different places in the world. And yeah, I always worry that I'm mispronouncing it. So, you know, I
got it right.
I have the same problem with my own name, you know, McLeod. A lot of people say McLeod or McLeod, or they have all kinds of weird things because they aren't familiar with Scottish, you know, Gaelic type spelling. So
yeah, well,
anyway,
I can relate to that. My maiden name is Doherty, but it's spelled D-O-U-G-H. So I got a lot of Doherty. So I know.
Yeah, it's
I know
interesting
how
how our names can trip people up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm so glad you're here. It's been a while. I know we talked about doing this quite a while back, and I'm just so glad you're able to join me and to share a little bit about what you do and who you are and that kind of stuff, because that's really what we're all about here is life mastery. And life mastery, as I've shared with people many times, isn't an end state. I don't know that anybody will ever be a 100% life master, but it's certainly a laudable objective to become masters of our lives, especially given that most of us start out with no clue at all about how to make this life work. So yeah, that's what we're here about.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And I love this concept of mastery and really taking the journey to understand ourselves better. I mean, I think that that's something that's always been part of my path, even from childhood, just really understanding what makes people tick, what makes me tick, what makes you tick. I think that that's probably, I just was born with a lot of curiosity, you know, and that serves me well most of the time. So right. It's a treat to be here. And I was really resonating when you were talking about in the intro about this, how we all really want to feel seen and heard, and yet we all have those experiences where it doesn't feel safe to be seen, right?
Right.
It doesn't feel safe to us. And I can certainly appreciate that and know that feeling quite intimately.
Right. Well, and it may not only seem to be unsafe, but it actually can be unsafe in some cases.
Right.
It's like if you speak up too much, you get slammed down again because somebody else who imagines that they have power over you decides that you're not supposed to talk. I didn't give you permission to talk. And so we have to deal with parents, with teachers, with other authority figures who imagine that they know better than we do. And this all happens, of course, when we're young. And as a result, we take on those very, very dysfunctional beliefs at a very early age, but we carry them through our lives. And I know that, I've had plenty of experiences like that. I used to hear all the time, children are to be seen and not heard. And, but the truth is that they didn't want to see me either. I can remember many times I might have a lot of energy. I might have been boisterous or something. And my mom said, "Not in the house, get the hell out of here." She didn't want to see it. She didn't want to experience it. She didn't want it. And of course, that's not about me. I know that now. But when I was a kid, yeah.
Right. Sure. As a child, it's very easy to internalize that and think, oh, there's something wrong with me. I did something wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that this is an important topic to you because you make it a platform of your entire business model. So helping people to become more visible. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here, and I'm gonna ask you, well, what happened in your life that led you to realize that visibility was so important? I mean, share whatever you like. It doesn't have to be super deep, but as deep as you like to go. Vulnerability is our trademark here.
Yeah. Well, I like to go deep as well. So we're going to get a little deep here, a little forewarning. And what you said about sometimes it really isn't safe to be seen, that was my experience. When I was 9 years old, I actually made a promise to be silent. I grew up in a family that on the outside, it looked quite normal, typical middle class family. But on the inside, in behind closed doors, it was quite toxic and dysfunctional and abusive. And for a while there, it was just something that I witnessed. But when I was 9 years old, that kind of came around for me directly in the form of sexual abuse and emotional abuse and neglect. And I kept my mouth shut. I kept my mouth shut about it because I was terrified, David, that if I spoke up, all hell would break loose and I'd lose my family. And I ended up staying silent for about 5 years until it really kind of became too painful for me to keep quiet about it any longer. And when I finally told my family what was going on, everything that I feared, I had the big worst case scenario playing in my mind, that the police would get involved, social services would get involved, I'd be put in foster care, I'd be separated from, my family members, the whole nine, right? Everything that I was fearing would happen didn't happen. Instead, my abuser denied everything. My family didn't believe me, and they swept it all under the rug like nothing had happened at all. And
I think that is probably the most common occurrence.
It is a common occurrence, and it was really devastating.
Of course.
Because it wasn't even a possibility. I hadn't even thought of that as a possibility. And it was really confusing to me. And so at that time, I'm 14 years old now, and I was shocked because I felt like no one had really heard me. They didn't care what was going on. And I felt like, okay, I'm 14. I was planning to go to college, so I knew I had another 4 more years of this. And I was on my own. No one's coming to save me. No one's coming to protect me. And all I could think of to do to survive was to make myself invisible. And it worked. I mean, it worked on some levels, right? The abuse ended, but the trauma and the impact from all of that was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was very much alive and active in my behavior and my energy. And so I carried that into adulthood. This survival pattern of hiding out to stay safe. And it didn't, the truth is, looking back on it, it probably did impact me even in my early adulthood, but I wasn't really aware of it. I had opportunities in my career to be visible, but I was in journalism, I was in marketing communications, I was a PR executive. So a lot of my work was really about making other people visible, and it made it really easy for me to kind of hang back in the background.
Sure. Well, right? I was going to say, in your own way, you were protecting yourself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to protect yourself. I mean, that's something that everybody does on one level or another. And the other thing I want to say is what happened to you, unfortunately, is not that uncommon. It's happening way too often in way too many families. And, it just really breaks my heart knowing stuff like that is going on. And I think all children, one way or another, all children are abused, not necessarily in the same way that you were, but we all have to suffer at the hands of these people who are supposed to be our caregivers and our caretakers and who supposedly love us. But they often do things out of their own misguided parenting skills to keep us under control in some strange belief that they're actually keeping us safe or something like that.
Yeah. And from their own wounding, right?
Of course, exactly. Yeah. So in your own way, then you kind of put this all under the carpet, your own internal carpet.
Yes.
You didn't want to share it with the world, and you certainly didn't want to show up, in public with that information available, because people are afraid to deal with it. People don't want to hear that stuff. It's pretty sad that we are not even able to hear each other when we're in pain.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? And part of visibility is being willing to have the conversation, right? Mm-hmm. But before you even have to be willing to have the conversation, there may be some healing work that needs to happen. And so this is exactly how this started to play out for me, because in 2013, I started my own business, and I became the voice and the face of my business. It was a lot harder to hide out, right? Not only that, at that time, I was helping clients find and create and share their signature stories. And so a lot of their stories, basically all that work is about getting vulnerable, right? And sharing your true self. And my clients would feel really comfortable sharing with me. I just naturally had an ability, probably most likely because of what I had been through, to create that safe space. That space of non-judgment. And I would hear it from my clients. I'd hear it in my everyday life. Like, oh my gosh, I've never shared that with anyone. Yeah. People would just always say that to me. But we didn't talk about why that was going on, right? Because I was terrified to share that part of me with people. I didn't want them to, I had the whole facade going on, right? Like the high achiever, I've got the kids and the house and the business, and it looks all bright and shiny on the outside, but really on the inside, there was a lot of shadow work I needed to do.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring it up.
Yeah. And, at that time, I didn't want to I had done, I've always been into personal development and personal growth. And so I had done some work, but I really hadn't done kind of the deeper work around it. And so I also had this, my ego saying, oh, you went to therapy, you took care of that, you don't need to deal with this anymore. I didn't understand
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
healing is not linear,
Mhm.
right? That new layers come up to be
That's
healed
right.
and transformed. And so I was very much in the place of, that's in the past. I don't want to look at it. I certainly don't want to talk about it. But at the same time, I kept getting this nudge, knowing, message, whatever you want to call it. You know, it was really my heart speaking to me. You got to tell this story.
Yeah.
You got to tell this story. And I was like, no, no, not that story. And I was trying on all kinds of other stories, right? But the reality is that I was naturally attracting clients who, um, traumatic experiences, you know, not necessarily exactly like mine, but traumatic experiences were influential and pivotal to the creation of their businesses,
Right.
right? And so there was a disconnect by me sort of being guarded and keeping them at bay, even though they could sense that about me, there was still this disconnect in our work together. And my business was kind of the entity, and I do see business as an entity, right? Like this was the entity that was, I didn't think of it as an invitation at the time, but was really inviting me to do more inner work around this. Um, and at that time, I didn't have a guide or a space. I'm sure that there was somebody out there who could have helped me, but I mean, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't recognize um, that my childhood wounding was playing out in my business. I didn't have the language, you know, I didn't even have the association of that I had gone through a traumatic experience, right? Like there was a complete
Exactly.
disconnect. Oh, I had a great life, you know. They provided for me.
That's right.
I mean, it was just not connecting the dots at all, right? Lots
Yeah.
of denial. Um, and I didn't know how to navigate it. And so I was fumbling through that experience for myself. It was kind of my own crash course in breaking through my visibility blocks and starting to take that journey of becoming invisible no more. And it was really my business. And it was my business in the sense of um, I, I my coping mechanism in childhood was to achieve, right? And so I would set goals, I'd achieve the goals, and I'd get the results. And I would just do that over and over and over. And that wasn't working in my business. You know, I'd set the goals, and then I was like, what's going on here? Like,
Another disconnect.
why am I not, like, I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the things. Why are my bank balances dwindling? Why is my credit card sky high? Like, how come my clients are getting mixed results? Like, what's going on here? Right. And so my business was the thing. And this, you know, sometimes it shows up in relationships, right? They mirror back the places where you need to
That's
pay
right.
attention,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Mhm. Well,
Um,
I'm going to ask you to pause for just a second. I want to just acknowledge the folks that have showed up here on the live show. Thank you for being here. I just want to remind you, if you have a comment or a question, or maybe you're resonating with what you're hearing here, please feel free to share that in the chat. We would love to have your input, and we will address your comments as they come up and as they fit into our stream of consciousness here. So what I wanted to say, you know, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you figured this out at apparently a fairly young age. You're clearly a lot younger than I am. It took me a long time to figure it out. I mean, I didn't even have a serious wake-up call until I was in my 40s. And, you know, I really resonate with what you're saying. It's we in order to get along, you know, we kind of hide the stuff. We don't want to make it a big deal in our family scenarios. And yet stuff comes out sideways, doesn't it? And we end up having other kinds of challenges. And I reached a point in my early 40s where I said, this life is not at all what I expected it to be. I am not happy. I'm not, I've done all the things they told me I was supposed to do. I met all the requirements, but I'm not happy. So what the hell's going on? And I eventually reached a point where my only solution was to run away, was to escape. I mean, by that time, I already had a family. I had 3 kids, and I just couldn't deal with any of that stuff anymore. I had a literal self-identity crisis. And I basically dropped everything. I ran for the hills of San Francisco, basically. And I got a job there, and I thought, oh, this is great. It's going to be all wonderful and good. And yeah, well, guess what? The pain didn't stay back in Edmonton, Alberta, where I was living. It followed me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to let me forget. And so I had to go through my process. And like you, I probably bounced around from one modality to another, trying to find something that would make me feel better. And I had a hard time, getting away from alcohol and other kinds of things that, they did help on a very, very superficial level, but they didn't make anything go away.
Yeah.
So I completely resonate with what you're talking about. And I know that eventually we have to face that dark stuff that we have been avoiding for so long. And I remember when I first started contemplating the idea of shadow work that you talked about earlier, I was terrified. The thought in my head was, I can't do that. If I reveal any of this stuff, I will have no friends at all. They're going to leave me alone. I'm going to die a lonely, boring old fart. That's what's going to happen. But what I discovered, and this is what blew my mind, is the exact opposite happened. The exact opposite.
Yeah.
The moment I found the courage to start sharing the truth about my history, which really wasn't as dark as I had made it out to be, those people started seeing me for who I really am. And I could feel the connections building. They didn't run for the hills. They didn't abandon me. They didn't leave me alone. No, I'm not going to tell you that every person I shared with became my best friend. No, that absolutely did not happen. Some people resonate, some don't. But that is the thing that's amazing to me. And this is what I keep trying to tell people who are young enough to do it now so that when you get older, you can really enjoy a good life, So I don't know. I'm sorry. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate what you're saying. And yeah, I waited a long time too. I thank you for, this is hitting me in my 40s as well. I feel like maybe that's, that's the time where we start to take stock a little bit. And a very similar experience where I was like, wait a minute, I got all the things I said I wanted. Why am I still unhappy? And so it was, this was actually after the period of when I started my business, but I also had that moment, even after sharing my story, of like, there's more work. there's another layer here that we need to go into. And that's how I started going deeper and doing more of that shadow work. And I was terrified too. I totally hear what you're saying about that. And full transparency, like there were many days in that journey. And I think this is important for the audience to hear, David, and hopefully this was your experience too, is that it can feel like a slog, and it can be exhausting, and it's painful at first in the beginning, right? Because you've spent all these years avoiding it and running from it and trying to keep that at bay. And then when you surrender, it can be overwhelming, but it doesn't stay that way forever. Like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? And when you get onto the other side of it, not only do you do you have that, you got the poison out of your system, but in that journey, you do pick up a lot of different modalities and you do pick up a lot of tools, and then you learn how to be with it. You learn
right.
how to manage it. So you've kind of like purified your soul, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be triggered again. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt again, but now you also have more tools in your toolbox. And so it's a much, I wish that people would teach this to children, right? So that they wouldn't have to suffer in silence with their pain, not knowing what to do with it for decades until they're 40, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you describe it as a kind of a slog. And I think I like that description, because it does feel, to me, here's what it felt like. It felt like I was kind of trying to swim through quicksand at first, trying to figure out where to go and how to get there. And then one day I had this amazing, like really a literal break me open kind of experience. It was like a volcano erupted. And all kinds of crap and corruption came out of me. All my anger and rage just came pouring out of me. And when that was done, it was followed by a whole bunch of deep, deep, painful sorrow that followed. So, but what's interesting about this is, as you say, you might not necessarily want to go into the experience of exploding like a volcano. That sounds kind of scary. But what I found at the end of that was an amazing lightness that I had never experienced before. And I could feel my body just completely opening and expanding. And every person who was in that room with me, I could see like there was light or something around them. I could see something beyond their physical nature. And in that moment, I knew we're all connected. We are amazing beings, and we're all connected. Now, the physical sensations and everything that happened in that kind of slowly settled. And over the next couple of weeks, I kind of came back to the same physical nature that I have now. But my mind was changed, my heart was changed, and the way I see the world was changed. And I still had more work to do. None of it, though, was ever that explosive. It was as if, it was a volcano had exploded, but there's still a little bit of lava left behind. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's going to come out in little dribs and drabs here and there as I do more work. Will there ever be an empty volcano? I don't know. Maybe. All I can say is I am like 100,000 times happier now than I ever was in the early days of my life. And that's all because I embraced the fear that was there. I looked at the opportunities. I saw other people doing their work, and that inspired me to do more work for myself. And the more work I did, the more I inspired other people. It was just a beautiful symbiosis, if you like. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but that's what comes to my mind. And I don't know, maybe you've had the same experience. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, it definitely resonates for me. And I love the volcano analogy, because it was similar in the sense of, when you try to put a lid on your feelings, your emotions, and there was a lot of, I'm sure, I don't have the official terminology or diagnosis, but I was dissociated, right? So it's completely disconnected. Like you heard some of that, and what I shared earlier, like there were a lot of things that like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I couldn't name how I was feeling. I couldn't name what I needed or what I wanted, or I struggled to ask for anything. And so that just sort of piled on, here I am, this volcano keeping a lid on everything that's going on underneath, but then also continuing this cycle of not being able to openly, not feeling safe to openly and freely express what's true for me, what I need, what I want, what I'm feeling. And like at some point that's going to explode. And so getting into, for me personally, inner child work was sort of my entry into that. And it was very similar where, I'd go into a session and I'd go back and I'd really look at particular experiences and I'd journal about it, and I'd journal about my feelings, and then they started to come out. They started to come out in the present. Exactly what you're saying: anger, rage, grief, sadness, despair, all of it. And it was a lot. It was a lot that needed to come. I would say that this was the intensity of it probably lasted for a solid year and a half. Right. And it took me that long to just surrender to that process and allow the feelings to come through. But it also opened doorways for me in the sense of I also had to learn how to get more vulnerable. Right. I also, there were things that I needed to say to people that I was terrified to say. Of course, as a child, you're terrified to say, hey, that's not okay. That's not okay that you ignored me, that you ignored my feelings. Right. And so I had to have these challenging conversations as an adult. But doing that, I had the same experience where it eventually got to the place where all of a sudden I felt I wasn't carrying that burden anymore. It felt so much lighter. And it started me more into that process of not necessarily making excuses for things that happen, but being able to accept it and accept it. And I'm going to use the word forgiveness. I know a lot of people have that's a charged word. For people, it was charged for me. But it helped me open up my perspective to understand that, these people, yes, it's true. This had nothing to do with me. And these people around me didn't have the tools or the resources, or they were doing the best they could with what they had. Doesn't make it right. And I also don't have to carry that vitriol or that anger or that disappointment either. It's just, this is what happened. Right.
Well, I think, you mentioned forgiveness. I think maybe this is a good time to actually talk a little bit about forgiveness, because I've done a lot of work around forgiveness, and I understand now that forgiveness is not what I thought it was years ago. Forgiveness is the real purpose of forgiveness is to allow me to let go of something so that I free myself. That's what forgiveness is. It's not at all saying it's okay what you did, or I'm no longer holding you responsible for that. It's not saying any of those things. You can hold someone responsible for something and still forgive them, because what you're doing when you're forgiving them is you're releasing yourself from any attachment to revenge or getting even or any of that stuff, because all that's doing is keeping the pain alive in your body and in your mind.
Yeah.
So when you forgive, you're saying, I'm just releasing this. I let spirit deal with it in whatever way it works. That person has his or her own life to lead. Whatever lessons he or she has to learn will happen in an appropriate time and an appropriate way. So I'm trusting spirit will make that happen. That's the beauty of forgiveness. And it becomes even more important when you think of it in terms of self-forgiveness, because we hold on to even stronger judgments and punishment mindedness when it comes to ourselves. And what we have to do in order to elevate our consciousness and become better human beings is we have to learn to let go of all that stuff. Because that's really just coming from our ego minds,
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought up that self-forgiveness piece too, because that's, it can be very easy to get into that space of, well, I should have known better. right? Where you start to judge yourself for the things, or, you know, I shouldn't care about this anymore, or and I really have learned to take a stand for myself, in the sense of, you know what, well, okay, I am feeling angry in this moment, and I am feeling betrayed. Like, what's that curiosity piece comes in, right? Like, what is this about? What's going on here? Instead of, well, I shouldn't feel this way anymore. Like, I thought I dealt with this. Like, it's not. You're right. Like, the forgiveness piece, I love that you said letting go of the attachment, right? Letting go of the attachment. And in the self-forgiveness, it's acknowledging, like, we're doing the best we can at the time.
Yep.
Right? And we're gonna make mistakes. That's part of life. And if you feel bad about the mistake that you made, like, then own the mistake that you made, right? You don't have to internalize it and beat yourself up about it and judge yourself and think terrible thoughts about yourself, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, if you make a
know,
mistake, I mean, it just means that you were temporarily unconscious in knowing who you really are. That's all it means. So, okay, I lost my consciousness momentarily, forgot about who I really am. I made this mistake. Now what can I do?
right.
Well, I take responsibility. That means I have to take accountability and own the mistake and understand what might have motivated me to slip out of consciousness to do that in the first place. Then I have to look at what consequences I created as a result of that mistake, because I'm responsible for those consequences too. And if somebody else got hurt as a result of what I did, then it's my responsibility, part of my responsibility, to go and correct that in whatever way I can. Make amends, make an apology, offer an act of service, do something that helps to correct the imbalance and bring you back into integrity with who you really are. That is what the process is all about. It's not about making yourself wrong or beating yourself up or even doing the same thing to anybody else. This is really, really important stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a secret of integrity, by the way, which is another major foundational key in the whole life mastery paradigm that I talk about. But integrity is a powerful tool, because anytime I am out of integrity, I can now look and say, I wonder what that's all about. You know? Now, you talked about feelings too, and I think our feelings are powerful input devices, if you like, that tell us something about what's going on in our world. And if we can learn to just kind of sit quietly and notice the sensations in our body, the emotions that are coming up, and the thoughts that are coming about in the consequence of that, we can do so much to heal ourselves, you know, especially if we can just simply observe without judging.
Yes, and that's our nature, right? We're born as sensing and feeling beings. And, you know, a baby, as far as I know, I mean, I'm not an expert on babies, other than,
oh, sure you are,
bringing two
you
into
were
the world,
a baby,
right?
once, therefore you're an expert on babies.
But as far as I know, there's no logic, there's no reasoning in those very early stages of being human, right? We're just sensing, we're feeling, we're experiencing, and there's not a lot of story going on around that, right? And so that's our nature. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, and I'm sure the viewers have noticed this, is that our society overvalues, or I would say undervalues. Let's say I was going to say overvalues logic and reasoning, but I'll say undervalues our physical and emotional wisdom, right? Really, really listening to our body, what our feelings and our body, right? Because I find, I don't know if this is true for you, David, but I find that it's often connected.
Of course, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. There's no separation. Any separation is purely an illusion of the ego mind. That's all it is. But that's a powerful point. I think society does. They seem to focus a lot of attention on logic, reason, science, linear thinking, all that stuff, at the expense of intuition, spiritual nature, gaining information from non-logical sources, that sort of thing. And what I think, this is a beautiful thing, actually, what I think quantum physics is starting to tell us is that there's way more than logic out there.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to see that, particles, for example, come in and out of existence seemingly at random, but there's a lot more to it than just randomness. It's all like consciousness kind of shifting and moving and expressing itself in all these amazing, beautiful, different ways throughout the universe. And that's ultimately what I think quantum physics is telling us. And therefore, that everything is connected. There is no separation. That separation is purely 100% illusion. So you cannot say that my thoughts cause my feelings or my feelings cause my thoughts, because they're all happening simultaneously. And the only thing that shifts is which one I'm aware of in any given moment.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, to me, that's energy, right? Like, it's just,
Yep.
It's our energetic field, and we have the power to shift that at any moment. Now, sometimes, we have, depending on our level of resistance, that might impact how easily and how quickly we can shift our energy. But I completely agree with you, that there's a place for both. There's a place, I mean, we need logic and reasoning. There's also a place for intuition and consciousness and energy and being connected to something greater than ourselves. I mean, I feel like this is our reality. This physical plane is just a sliver of what's out there, right, in the universe. This is just one sliver of that experience. So this idea that we can function purely on logic and reasoning and the practical alone, or the other way too, right? Because I've seen this. We hang out in with the spiritual community, and sometimes there's sort of this other opposite response to, well, it's all just spiritual stuff. Like, you don't need your ego, you don't need logic, you don't need, well, yeah, we need both of them.
Well, you may not need it once you transcend beyond the physical nature.
Right.
But while you're here on this,
in
this physical form, logic and ego are actually pretty useful devices.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked earlier about, I think you said you took a vow of silence when you were a child.
Yes.
Do you remember we don't need details. I mean, do you remember the circumstances that happened when you said, that's it, I'm not going to talk anymore, or I'm not going to say anymore, or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, I think that having that experience when I was 9, I would say a big part of that was really being concerned about impacting other people. So my parents had divorced when I was a baby, right? And so I just sort of had this knowing that that was a difficult thing for my mother. I didn't know all the details. That wasn't necessarily shared with me. I just knew kids know, right? And so I already sort of had this awareness, belief. I don't know. I guess it was a belief of, like, not wanting to hurt, not wanting to cause my mom more hurt. Right. And so staying silent about what happened, like clearly I was old enough to know, like, this is messed up and it's really painful, and it's going to be really painful for my family, and I don't want to hurt my family. And so there was this belief that was born that if I share my truth, it'll hurt others. And then when I finally shared what was going on, a new belief kind of popped up. Well, if I share my truth, it's going to get ignored anyway. So why even bother? Nobody cares. Nobody's interested in my truth, my story, what's going on with me. It doesn't matter. I don't matter.
So that reinforces your desire to stay quiet and not even share the truth. Right. And so I guess, yeah, this is a funny thing about people. I don't think people are necessarily afraid of truth, but they may be afraid of speaking the truth if it is contrary to like a strongly held belief system or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, nobody has a monopoly on truth. Nobody knows for sure exactly what truth is, but each of us knows what's true for ourselves. Each of us can say, this is what's true for me. This is what happened for me. You can agree with it or disagree with it. You can pretend that it never happened if you want, but it really happened. And it happened to me, for me. You know?
Yeah. And I would say that the big shift for me in my energy, and I had help with this. You know, I've worked with healers, I've worked with coaches, and what broke this open for me was number one, recognizing that those beliefs were lies, right? Lies that were intended to protect me and protected me for a period of time that I didn't need anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then to sort of surrender those, but then also rise into a new belief that, well, I am responsible for making my truth matter. Like I make my truth matter, regardless of how everybody else is going to feel about it or say about it or think about it or do about it or not. Like exactly what you're saying, right? I know what's true for me and I'm responsible for making that matter. And so I see parallels of this in the work that I do with clients where they're like, well, you know, exactly what you're saying. It's one thing to sort of speak up in a friendly audience, right? A lot of people want to avoid conflict, and I get that. I totally get that, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like that, you know, an audience that maybe is in agreement with you is not necessarily going to give you permission to share. So it's up to you to make it matter, right? It's up to you to decide. And it's okay to decide, like, no, I'm not going to do it with this particular audience. That's okay too. There's a place for boundaries and visibility. Absolutely, we need visibility boundaries too, and going back to the beginning of our conversation, like we need to start having more difficult conversations about what's going on. We have a lot of challenges in society, and part of the problem is that we're being silent about it, and we need to break that silence. We need to be willing. We need to not only be willing to have the conversations, but we also need to learn how to be in those conversations responsibly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you said the word yourself, responsible conversations. And I think that that's a big part of the problem that we have in our world. People are terrible communicators. And when I say that, I don't say it maliciously. I just say that we haven't learned the skills collectively to communicate properly with other people. You see, what I have practiced for myself, and I don't always succeed at this. I mean, let's face it, we all get triggered and we all say things that we don't really mean. But when I am able to stay grounded, then I'm able to communicate what's going on for me without putting anything onto the other person. I can say, I observed you do such and such and such. And when that happened, I felt this, I had this experience. It reminded me of getting beat up by my father, this and that, whatever. You know, I'm not asking you, when I say that, by the way, I'm not asking you to change anything about what you're doing. I just want you to be aware of what happened for me when that happened. It's a trigger. It's my trigger. You are not responsible for my trigger. That's my responsibility. But when I share that, and whatever that story might be, and you hear it, you say, oh yeah, I can see that. You now have the opportunity as the receiver of that information to say, I appreciate your sharing that with me. I'm going to try to find a slightly different way of expressing this to you. But if we could all learn to speak using I statements and self-responsible communication and coming from a place of compassion rather than trying to blame the other person for something. Excuse me. How often has someone said, you make me feel like such an idiot? I mean, come on. First of all, you can't feel like an idiot because that's a thought. It's not a feeling. Secondly, no one else can make you feel that way. That's up to you. You choose to feel that way because of something else that they did. This is something that we have to recognize as individuals. And the moment, as soon as more and more of us can adopt those skills and start practicing them, conflict itself will start to diminish. That's why people are afraid of conflict, because when they see you approaching them and saying and wanting to say something, they're expecting to be beat over the head with your words.
Yeah, they don't feel safe.
That's right.
They don't feel safe. Yeah. And yeah, it's definitely it's a skill that we can all learn. It's a skill that I've been learning, and part of becoming a certified sourced retreat master is about, number one, like slowing down, being present, really listening to the other person, validating their experience. We don't necessarily have to agree with everybody, right? That's not what that's about at all. But we can take a moment and be present with other people's experiences and validate, okay, I hear that was your experience, David. That must have been really challenging or difficult. I can see how what I said could have been triggering for you, right? Like it's not rocket science, but we also, it's not modeled to us very often, right? It's something that you have to go and seek out, and usually there's some sort of crisis going on with a relationship or your business or whatever that will be the catalyst for that. And I feel like we could probably do a whole other show about communication, right?
Well, I was just thinking that myself. Maybe we should do a course or something on this.
Right. Yeah. But it's like this is really essential right now. I mean, things are so emotionally charged. We're kind of going through this evolutionary process as humanity, and these are the kinds of skills that can create those safer spaces to have those really challenging conversations, and for others to learn, who want to learn how to let go of their need to be right, let go of their need to be on the defensive, and can start to expand their capacity for being with their own emotions, with other people's emotions, and with conflict without it coming to, without it getting nasty, without it coming to blows.
Yeah. And who wants anything to come to blows? Really, most of us don't.
Right.
Even when we're confronted by somebody who seems intent on attacking us, most of us will just do the bare minimum to protect ourselves. Most of us won't get involved and start fighting back, which that just tells me that our nature is not to hurt people. It's usually the ego mind gets activated and it wants to lash out and hurt. But yeah, the spiritual nature just simply doesn't want to do that, So you mentioned a little earlier about this concept of the visibility. I think you said visibility vibration or something like that.
Mm.
And I want to explore that a little bit, because that sounds like a pretty important topic.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it a little bit when I was sharing about, shifting out of that that belief and that energy. It's not just the belief, right? Like it's carrying a certain energy of, well, my truth doesn't matter, right? And so I show up in that way. And so showing up in a different way, a different vibration of, wait a minute, like I do matter. What does it look like to make myself matter, for example, right? And so it's one thing to get that intellectually, and it's another thing to sort of actually feel it. And then it's another thing to embody it and integrate it into your life. And transforming your frequency, your visibility frequency, it actually starts first and foremost with a commitment to change. Right. So I had to be committed to changing how I was operating.
Right.
And the precursor to like, am I going to change, is it typically shows up as inner conflict. Right. And so we have a desire. So for a lot of my clients, I hear, and this was true for me, like, I really want to be seen. Like, I want people to see me. I want I want to feel like I'm being heard. Right. And so there's that desire. But then there's this discomfort of like, ugh. Like that feels really vulnerable. Right. Oh my God, I gotta like open up. I gotta be vulnerable. I gotta let down my guard. Like that feels really uncomfortable. I'm not used to that. Right. Because we're programmed and conditioned to wear a mask, we get messages like fake it till you make it and all of this. We're programmed on some level to be false.
Well,
right?
yeah,
So,
just look at this. Every one of us wears something.
Yeah.
And what are we doing with that? We're creating a false image of who we really are.
Yeah.
We all do it. We choose the styles that we want to wear in order to convey a certain message. But let me ask you this. How do you imagine people will see you if you are completely naked? All right, once we get over the little titillating laughter about, yeah, we're going to see breasts and penises and all this kind of stuff. Once you get past that, you're just going to see another beautiful human being just like yourself.
Right.
All different shapes and sizes, and take off the jewelry, take off the clothes. I mean, just stand there and now speak your truth.
Yeah.
You thought it was hard when you had clothes on. But I don't know, there's something magical that can happen there when you are naked with other people. The vulnerability suddenly becomes easier. And sharing your truth from the heart becomes easier. And I know this from personal experience, by the way, in case you're wondering. I've had experiences with people. And
I'm sure that was a breakthrough experience to have to really literally bear it all. Yeah.
That's right. And what I learned was, I've done workshops with this organization called the Human Awareness Institute, and all of their workshops are clothing optional. What I learned in that experience was when I could strip off the outside shield and costume and just be who I am, suddenly people do see me. It really is a beautiful experience. So I encourage people to check that out for themselves. Human Awareness Institute, if that's what you're interested in. Lots of really, really excellent workshops there. And I think what they do because of that, when you can strip away the bullshit, as I like to say, and get down to the nitty gritty and the guts of who you really are, believe me, you'll like it a lot better. And then wearing clothes then just becomes, conforming to society at that point.
Yeah. Or a form of expression that's not so much,
right.
You're not so attached to.
That's right.
Like it's not necessarily attached to your identity. And I appreciate you bringing up this getting naked example. It reminds me, I can't remember the name of that series that was on Netflix recently, with Jaya, John, and Gwyneth Paltrow. But they had an exercise where they had one of the couples, they had them kind of strip down and just look at themselves in the mirror, and just know it, like, it's without the judgment, like, what do you notice? What do you appreciate? What do you like, really taking a good hard look at at yourself, right? Without all the stuff,
All the
without all the
time, yeah.
makeup, without all the clothes, like,
Without all
and
the
really
decorations. Yeah.
without all the decorations, right? And it sounds like a little controversial to talk about, right? But it's a very disarming kind of experience. So I can appreciate how that it can help people understand, like, oh, okay, I don't, it's actually okay to not look this certain way, that I think that people are only going to accept me this way, or, say this certain thing, or act this certain way. It's like, no, this is me. You're either with me, or you either accept it or you don't, and that's okay. That's your choice too.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
all
I'll
have
go
our
a step
preferences.
further. I'll go a step further. Uh, I mean, if we remove the outer shields, well, then what's left? We've got this naked body, right? Naked body. But when I do a deep dive into myself, I realize I'm not this body either.
Yeah.
My truth is that I am, and I say this quite often, and I see this in other people. I say, I am a divine, magnificent, unlimited spiritual being of light and love who just happens to be sharing a temporary human experience on the planet in this form, in this physical form. But that's not who I am. This is not who I am here. And I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my beliefs, I'm not the roles I play, I'm not my name. Those are just qualities or attributes that show up now and then, little miniature expressions of who I really am. And this has taken me a long time to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm there, I cannot come back and say I am this body. It just makes no sense to me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll often joke and just say the skin suit. It's the skin
Sure.
suit.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
we're
we've
far
got a
more
little over our
expansive
time here, and
than the body.
It's been a fabulous conversation. And I just wanted to say, first of all, before we close out, you have a gift that you're offering, and it's going to be on my website. It's going to be on your recording page once that's up later on today. Can you please just describe what that gift is all about?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, reparenting myself and inner child healing was really pivotal in my own visibility journey, and really my own healing journey in general. So I felt called to share that with others, and I've created a gift called Heal Your Inner Child Experience. It includes a guided inner child healing meditation and a journaling exercise to help open up your heart, right? Let down your guard, clear some of that energy so that you can get to your true essence, like we were just talking about. So that true essence is seen and heard and felt from a place and a space of authentic connection.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So that will be available on my website at lifemasterytv.com, and I'll give you the link a little bit later. But I want to say, Gayle, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a fabulous conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to say, to final words before I close out?
Well, I want to thank you. This is a great conversation. I love that we kind of touched on a lot of different topics. And for those who are listening, I just encourage you to really tap into some of the concepts that we were talking about today, in particular, like who you truly are as a soul. And the world really needs to see that, right? Really needs to see beyond the programming and the conditioning and the masks that have been put upon us. We need authenticity and vulnerability and truth now more than ever.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you all for joining us here today and watching this show. And I'd just like to remind you that recordings of this and every other episode of Life Mastery TV can be found on my website at lifemasterytv.com, life-mastery-tv.com. I truly hope you enjoyed this program. I know that you will have the opportunity a little bit later on to provide a review. I hope you'll do that. Give us a review, and positive reviews help us to share the word even more. And then finally, I just like to remind everybody about my life mastery mantra, something for you to take home and practice every single day. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Until we meet again, my name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.